While excavating the site of a temple dating from Roman Britain, archaeologists made a grisly discovery. A skull placed in an upright position was found at the bottom of a deep pit. Strangely, there were no other bones from the rest of the skeleton found with it. The skull showed signs of having been battered with a heavy weapon.
This is the sort of thing that you observe in forensic cases when somebody's been whacked on the head with a blunt instrument.
But even more intriguing were the countless scratches on its surface.
Under a microscope, they appear to be made by a very fine, very sharp knife.
Was this person the victim of warfare or murder? Or do the strange marks on the skull point towards something darker still? Perhaps human sacrifice. It's a puzzle that such a seemingly barbaric act took place during a time of relative law and order under Roman rule.
You don't expect to find decapitated heads placed in pits in the middle of a Roman city.
Could this bizarre find reveal something new about the lives of our ancient ancestors? The historic town of St. Albans lies about 30 kilometers north of London. Today it is peaceful and respectable, but the macabre discovery of the mutilated skull suggests that its ancient past may tell a different story. Nestling among St. Albans' quaint buildings and winding streets are the remains of the town's Roman past. These ancient stones hold vital clues that could unravel an intriguing mystery. Archaeologist Miranda Green is a leading expert in ancient Britain. The story of the skull so far makes her suspect that this person was the victim of a ritual killing. Applying the latest technology, she hopes to determine for sure how and why this person was killed, and what exactly happened to their head afterwards.
We've got this cut going across here.
I mean, are we actually dealing with the very point of the blade here?
It was here, near the site of a large Roman temple, that the skull was brought up from the bottom of an ancient pit. Archaeologist Rosalind Niblett was there at the time of the discovery and shows Miranda exactly where the skull was found.
Well, down on the slope, as you went down the slope, you would have come past a whole lot of deep pits, shafts almost,
Oh, right.
about 40 of them.
And these are rubbish pits, or?
Well, they had quite a lot of rubbish in them, but not all of them. Some of them had very peculiar things in, particularly this one pit, which right at the bottom had a human skull.
Just on its own?
Yes.
No body? Just the skull?
No, just the skull.
So what did you think when you excavated this skull? You must have thought,
Well, I mean, it obviously wasn't a burial because there was no other body. So immediately we thought, well, this is rather odd.
Miranda is determined to solve the mystery surrounding the strange solitary skull. Her search for clues begins at the Verulamium Museum in St. Albans.
Yes, and here.
The skull is in a simple box, stored alongside the hundreds of other artifacts kept in the museum vaults.
shall I take it?
Okay, thanks.
Miranda is keen to set eyes on the skull for the first time, to see up close the damage it has received.
Gosh. You can immediately see that there's been quite a lot of trauma, hasn't there?
Well, some of it is after it's been buried, I think. It's, but you see this hole here, and there's another one here. These seem to have been deliberate blows to the head in antiquity.
So possibly the cause of death, then?
Either the cause of death or very shortly afterwards, yes. But sort of more interestingly, in a way, was when it was washed, we could see these. You see all these sort of striations here.
Oh yeah.
Now those aren't natural.
No, and they're running in lots of different directions.
Yes, it's almost as if it had been sort of scratched. You know, and I thought, well, that's odd.
Miranda hits the road on her hunt for clues. She takes the 145-kilometre journey to Portsmouth, a historic naval town on England's south coast. Her destination is a forbidding military fort.
So we've come to this amazing early 18th century fort, where we've got the headquarters of English Heritage, the Centre for Archaeology, and it's at the laboratory here where they've got the technology where we can really get a close look at this skull and see what's really been going on.
Miranda is after the opinion of forensic archaeologist Simon Mays.
Ah, right, what have we got here then?
Well, something I think is going to interest you anyway.
His expertise in the study of bone will help answer some of the questions surrounding the strange skull. They carefully unpack the fragile remains. The lower jaw and several teeth are missing and were not in the pit. It's the rest of the skull that is here to tell the tale. It's clear that much of the trauma was inflicted around the time of death, but some damage has occurred during the 2,000-year-old stint in the ground. Simon can deduce a lot by scrutinizing the primary evidence in this ancient case.
It seems to be a fairly young individual. If you look at the sutures that connect the skull bones, you can see that there's quite a gap between them. And this is pretty typical of an adolescent individual.
The teeth will give them a better idea of the person's age at time of death.
This is the upper jaw, and if we look at this, we can see that there's this wisdom tooth here, the third molar. And if we pop it back into the socket, we can see that it's still unerupted. Which again is
shorter, isn't it?
That's right. So I think we're talking about somebody who's about 15 or 16 years of age, something like that.
So the victim was an adolescent on the brink of adulthood.
As regards whether it's male or female, that's pretty clearly a male skull. I mean, we can see the development of the brow ridge in this area here.
Well, that's greater than it would be with a...
Absolutely, yes. And you've got a sort of sloping forehead. Men have sloping foreheads. Women have vertical ones. So looking at this, I'm pretty confident we're dealing with a boy of about 15 or 16.
Having established the age and sex, Miranda is keen to move on to the more intriguing aspects as to how this young boy died.
Clearly, this skull has received some kind of damage. I mean, is that... Can you tell anything about that at all?
Well, just looking at this, within the skull, we can see some very interesting injuries. For example, there's a hole just here. If you look at the shape of that hole there, you can see it's beveled internally.
These inward-pointing edges of the hole are a clear indication of foul play.
This is the sort of thing that you observe in forensic cases when somebody's been whacked on the head with a blunt instrument.
Right, and that could have killed him, could it?
Oh, I think so, yeah. I mean, there's no sign of healing there.
No.
And that's detached, a chunk of bone which has got pushed out down into the brain.
Right.
In total, there were 4 separate injuries of the same kind on the skull.
I imagine it was a sort of flurry of blows. Once in the sort of forehead area, once on the side of the skull, and 2 more times at the back there. So he's received quite a beating.
He has, hasn't he? Yes.
These terrible head injuries clearly point to a horrendous attack. But how does Simon interpret the puzzling cut marks that Rosalind identified back at the museum?
There's a great variety of scratch marks, and we can see quite clearly here. They seem to run in all different directions, in a sort of random way, almost. It's quite extraordinary.
So what do you think the purpose of those cuts is?
When you find cut marks of this nature on the skull, you're really looking at 2 different possibilities.
Right.
The first one is scalping, and the second one is defleshing.
There's a crucial difference. With scalping, the desired object is the scalp itself, but with defleshing, the aim is to remove the skin and flesh, and it's the skull that is valued.
And what do you think we've got then?
I'm pretty sure we've got defleshing. With scalping, you tend to get a sort of halo of cuts. I mean, what actually, you'd be grabbing the hair and cutting round it and popping the thing off.
Right.
That doesn't seem to be the case here, because these cuts are randomly orientated and distributed over the entire area of the skull.
But if this young man died in a frenzied attack, why was the flesh cut off his skull and his head then removed and placed in a deep pit near a sacred site? It doesn't smack of plain and simple murder, but of something more sinister and bizarre, a throwback to an Iron Age ritual.
We've certainly got evidence both from archaeology and from the classical literature that heads were collected as battle trophies. So one thing you do, you kill your enemy, you take the head, you sling it along your saddle or perhaps put it on your spear tip, and you take it home and you offer it up in the temples of the gods of victory as a kind of, thank offering for succeeding in battle.
Could the strange skull of St. Albans have belonged to an enemy warrior? There is another possible explanation.
The other idea, which I think I favour, is the notion that it was some kind of ritual enactment, that it was possibly associated with human sacrifice, but if not to do with sacrifice, some kind of collective ritual act.
This youth died during the 2nd century, the height of Roman rule in Britain. The Romans had brought with them their rites and religions, but remnants of Celtic ritual practices still survived. But who was doing it? And how did they do it? Ritual sacrifice expert Miranda Green is on an investigation. She's trying to find out how and why a young boy was killed, decapitated, and his head defleshed. Her search has brought her to the Fort Cumberland Laboratory in Portsmouth, where state-of-the-art equipment will be used to examine the strange cut marks found on the skull. Scientist David Dungworth is using an electron scanning microscope to produce a really detailed close-up of the marks.
Well, the skull itself is too big for us to examine in the electron microscope, so what we're going to do is we're going to take some silicon rubber impressions of the cut marks.
One of the things I'd like to know, whether you've got different kinds of cut, possibly suggesting different hands at work. Because I've got this theory that maybe lots of people were involved in this and sharing the responsibility for that action.
Yeah.
Once a detailed imprint of the scratches has been taken, these small samples have to be coated with a fine layer of gold in order to show up every microscopic detail of the scratches. The team gather round to analyze the results.
Well, this is quite interesting, this one. Firstly, it shows the random nature of the cuts, in a way they seem to crisscross one another. Well, I mean, you can see it's very clearly on this one. We've got two cuts going in this direction here and being cut by another one crossing straight across them. So you've got dense intercutting, crisscrossing of cuts here. Another thing that's interesting is you can see there's a variation in the width of the cuts. You've got a very narrow knife mark in there. This one's rather wider and this one seems to be sort of intermediate between the two. It's possible that there are different blades being used.
Could this variation in the cuts back up Miranda's theory that this was a ritual defleshing carried out by several people?
Something that's quite clear from not just this SEM image, but from all the other ones, is that there's a regularity in terms of depth. They're all fairly light cuts. So, I mean, if I had to make a call on this, I'd probably tend to the idea that it's one individual rather than several.
So Miranda's theory that a number of people were involved in the defleshing has been overturned. The highly detailed electron microscope results have thrown up further food for thought.
There are some quite subtle marks that the SEM image has revealed. We have these very shallow linear impressions running roughly parallel to one another, sort of from top right to bottom left. And what those seem to me to represent is scraping marks. The blade being scraped across the surface of the skull. This kind of an action, across like that, and these little marks would come out of irregularities in the blade as it's being drawn across to actually scrape off adherent skin and flesh. And that's something new that we've learnt by looking at the SEM images. We couldn't tell that just by looking at the gross specimen.
This high-tech, detailed examination of the skull points towards an orderly ritual killing and careful scraping off of the flesh, rather than a frenzied attack. But what did this bizarre ritual signify? Could the defleshing of the skull have been a punishment, as head shaving during the Iron Age was sometimes thought to be?
We have some evidence quite often of young people where the heads have been shaved as a punitive act. It's a highly visible thing to do, and shaming the head, because the head is regarded as the most important part of the body, if you shame the head, then you're shaming the entire person.
But how does this seemingly barbaric act fit into the picture of civilized Roman Britain? Miranda leaves the skull with Simon so he can continue his forensic analysis. Returning to the scene of the crime, St. Albans, Miranda wants to see if she can put any more pieces of the jigsaw puzzle into place. By 200 AD, the Romans were well established across Britain. The thriving settlement of Verulamium, now St. Albans, boasted an elaborate bathhouse, a theatre, a temple, and a marketplace selling goods imported from the rest of the empire. The better off lived in villas decorated with beautiful mosaics and boasting underfloor heating. It could hardly be considered a savage place.
So I've been finding out about this strange goings-on at St. Albans, but we have to remember that we're actually here in a major Roman city. I'm standing here in an enormous theatre, where there would have been great public gatherings with Roman things going on, and over here is the forum, the main marketplace and meeting place of a Roman town. Across here behind me, there would have been an enormous triangular temple. So we have to remember that what's odd about what we've been looking at with this head, this skull, is that it's going on in this very, very Roman town, and you don't expect to find things like that, decapitated heads placed in pits in the middle of a Roman city.
A short trip across St. Albans to the exact site of the skull's discovery may provide some answers. In order to get to the bottom of this mystery, Miranda needs to go up, to get a bird's eye view of the burial place in relation to the thriving Roman city.
Well, there's very little that we can see of ancient Verulamium. As you can see, it's all buried under sort of housing estates and new buildings. But under this group of houses here, we've got the early temple, the mausoleum, and a very important temple of the 1st century AD. Then if we go further down towards the valley, right facing me is the actual site where the skull in the pit was found.
So the skull wasn't dumped just anywhere. It was buried near the site of a substantial complex of religious buildings just outside the town.
Well, of course, the temple was in its own precinct, a very big precinct, and then the entrance through this enclosure was just beyond those cars.
I see.
Very almost on the edge of the hill.
Yeah, so quite a commanding site, actually.
Oh,
isn't
very,
it?
because we're overlooking the site of the Roman town down in the valley there. It's very. When you were in the middle of the town, you would have looked up and you would have seen this temple.
Would have been on the skyline,
there on the
wouldn't it?
skyline.
Yes.
Other intriguing objects dating from the same period found within the temple complex confirm Miranda's suspicions. Among them are Roman face pots, but with a crucial difference.
On our site, the faces had nearly all been cut out, almost entirely removed. Yes. If you look at this one, you've got the ear there.
Away, yes.
Just the edge of the eye there, but the face corresponding to that. Almost,
Actually
defleshed,
if you like.
Yes. It's almost as if they've gone round with an apple corer or something and removed the face.
Oh, that's weird.
And this happened over and over again in the with the face pots from the other pits.
That's quite odd.
Yes.
This strikes Miranda as more than just a coincidence.
So it almost looks as though we've got a kind of analogy between the skull and the face pots, that both have been defleshed and damaged and deliberately sort of destroyed, if you like.
Stranger still are 3 skeletons, probably female, buried at the entrance to the temple complex.
And these are middle-aged women, are they?
They're varying ages. One of them seems to have been quite young. One of them was maybe 50, that sort of age, and one sort of fairly middle-aged.
Yeah, I see.
Some of which showed signs of physical imperfection.
It's tempting to say that these women were selected and perhaps killed.
And they were put there really to guard the entrance into the enclosure.
But only on one side. Was there anything on the other side?
On the other side, there was a very small pit, a tiny little pit, with nothing in it at all, apart from just this one brooch.
The brooch was decorated with 6 concentric circles, representing 3 sets of eyes.
So one side of the entrance, you've got these 3 women. On the other side, you've got this sort of talisman or amulet with 3 pairs of staring, open eyes.
That's very weird, isn't it?
Yes.
For Miranda, the more she finds out, the less clear the picture becomes. The proximity of the sacred site, the suggestion that the skull was displayed, the symbolism of the pots and the other burials, it seems to be pointing towards a ritual killing. Back in Portsmouth, Simon's forensic examination of the skull has revealed something that may have a crucial bearing on the case. He's found some evidence of damage, this time to the base of the skull.
We can see here, in this area here, this is just where the top of the spine joins the skull. And we can see this is all broken away.
Oh, yes.
Difficult to be sure of the interpretation of this, but it's just the kind of thing you tend to see if you're mounting a skull on a pole.
So after being decapitated and defleshed, the youth's head might have been rammed onto a pole for all to see. That could indeed be interpreted as an act of punishment. But once again, the teeth provide a vital clue, giving a different picture.
We can see here that the enamel is in pristine condition. Now, in bodies exposed to the elements, you tend quite quickly to get cracking and flaking away of the enamel.
Oh, I see.
So that would suggest that it was exposed only for a fairly short amount of time, or it may even have been exposed in an indoor environment rather than sort of fully out in the elements.
So the head may have been displayed inside the temple as a sacred object, rather than outside as a warning to others.
So the evidence, all in all, is consistent, perhaps, with this head being placed in a temple and looked at and venerated indoors.
Yes, I think there are a number of lines of evidence that support the idea that it was put on a stake and it was some sort of object of veneration.
With the final piece of the puzzle in place, Miranda has now got the full picture of what happened to the youth.
If one takes all that evidence together, you've got a pretty sort of gruesome vignette, really, haven't you, of what went on? You know, the killing, the defleshing, display,
Yes.
and then the final deposition.
Yes.
Right on the doorstep of the civilized world of Roman Britain, this savage and forbidden act of sacrifice took place.
I think it's interesting that it's occurring in the Roman period at a time when this kind of ritual activity would have been frowned upon by the Roman authorities. And I suspect that if we're dealing with a sacrificial ritual, then it's the response to a great crisis, perhaps a famine or crop failure, disease, that kind of thing.
This seemingly barbaric ritual may have been a sacred act, a sacrifice of thanks, or even a desperate plea for help. Far from a victim of punishment or murder, this boy was chosen as a messenger, sent to the other world to commune with the gods.